Good morning and welcome to Coventry Vineyard. My name's Nick, and if you're here for the first time, you are very, very welcome. I hope you're enjoying the summer. It's now mid-August. It may be that you've been away, or you're planning to go away, or you're simply staying around in Coventry and working. Whatever you're doing, if you're with us today, you are very, very welcome. I've just been reflecting on a couple of things recently. Every time I get into my car, I can plug my phone in and listen to some music, and all hands-free and everything. And there's one song that always comes up at the beginning, and it's not my favourite song, but it's David Bowie's Absolute Beginners. And sometimes the settings in the car are particularly loud, and so I have the beginning of this song bursting in as I'm just trying to get in and go on a drive. And I've been reflecting on this recently, how it feels like we're always absolute beginners. And last week I talked about just the difference between being and doing. And I want to just reflect at the beginning this morning on what it means to focus on some of the being rather than just the doing. And it's not that doing is wrong, but we want to be in the presence of God. And so today I want to just talk about a bit of a spiritual discipline, spiritual formation exercise about being in God's presence. Thomas Merton wrote, "In the spiritual life, there are no tricks and no shortcuts. One cannot begin to face the real difficulties of the life of prayer and meditation unless one is first perfectly content to be a beginner and really experience oneself as one who knows little or nothing and has a desperate need to learn the bare rudiments." I don't know about you, but sometimes I feel like I'm still a beginner when it comes to following Jesus. Merton goes on to say, "We don't want to be beginners, but let us be convinced of the fact that we will never be anything else but beginners all our life." Richard Raw comments that prayer is not primarily saying words or thinking thoughts, it is rather a stance. It's a way of living in the presence. And so wherever you are on this journey of following Jesus, it may be you're feeling like a beginner, and that's okay. We're all beginners. And this comes out of what we call the contemplative tradition, which is a response to God's longing that we spend time with him, that we create space in our lives for him, which is what I was speaking about last week. James Bryan Smith and Linda Graybeal say our lives are busy and full of worries and anxiety, and we know that that's true, especially in the current situation. They go on to say that practicing the disciplines of the contemplative tradition equips us to create space in our lives, the space that God longs for and the intimacy that we need. And so there's this contemplative life, which isn't really opposed to the active life. It's not that being is better than doing, it's just that they work together. And the goal of this contemplative life is really simply to know God. Both are important, the contemplative and the active, just as important as it is to inhale and exhale. We have to do both. And so today there's an exercise I want to just share with you, which is called centering prayer. And it sounds a little bit mystic, and it's really just a form of contemplative prayer where the prayer seeks to quiet all those thoughts and desires into the stillness and into the center of being in God's presence. And so centering prayer helps us to rest in the presence of Jesus, helps us to wait before him in attentiveness. It helps us to become more aware of the presence of the Holy Spirit within us. And so as we're resting in God's presence, we can then also start to remove some of the distractions and the busyness of life. And it helps us do this by focusing on an aspect of Jesus or God's characteristics. And then when those distractions come in, we can release those into the hands of God. And it's similar to just being with somebody rather than just doing and talking all the time. So centering prayer is not something new. It's not a new age thing. It's an ancient form of prayer that joined reflective Christian meditation on a word of scripture with prayer. And some of the ancient sort of desert fathers would do this for a long time. But what I'm going to suggest today is that maybe just start by spending 10 or 15 minutes, maybe even each day over the next week, being in God's presence. And then let me know how that goes for you. So centering prayer is distinctively different from Eastern meditation. Eastern meditation attempts to kind of clear the mind of all thoughts. What centering prayer does is it allows for the recognition of those thoughts and then gently releases them into the hands of God. And so we rely on an awareness of the Holy Spirit with us as we pray. It might seem a little bit mysterious because it doesn't depend on lots of words, and we're used to just talking all about the information that we want to get across to God about our needs and projects and our ideas and programs and plans and agendas, and we want to tell him what to do, or maybe just suggest things we would like him to do. But this sort of prayer just lets us sit in his presence and reflect on who he is and where we are with him. So just a brief method. What I would suggest you do is you set aside 15 minutes or so, and if you're worried about what the time is, you can set a timer. Sometimes I'll set a timer for 20 minutes, so it just gives me time just to settle in. And then I settle into a comfortable position. I've learned not to lie down because I tend to fall asleep. I can tend to fall asleep in most different positions. So in this comfy chair, I might sit forwards and not be too comfy, but just settle down. And then I intentionally place myself in the presence of God, in the center of his love. And then I'll choose a simple word. It may be a phrase that I've been reading in the Bible that day. And it may be something simple as love or peace or grace. The other day I was reading John 15:9, where Jesus talks about remaining in his love. And so I can take that into a centering prayer and say, I remain in your love. And when my thoughts start to get distracted, just come back and say, I remain in your love. It's not unusual for the first minutes to be filled with noisy thoughts and distractions. Henri Nouwen talked about them being like monkeys in a tree that are trying to get your attention. And he says, just let the monkeys settle down. Don't worry about them or pay attention to them. Just let them go. Gently return to the phrase or the word. So just come back to, I remain in your love, whatever it is that you're focusing on. And so during that time, we are being with Jesus. It's similar to the beloved disciple just resting on Jesus's shoulder at the Last Supper, just being with Jesus. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some of this method on our Instagram account, Coventry Vineyard, so you can come back to that and have a look at that, and they'll be on our website as well. And so my kind of encouragement for you for this week is to set aside 15 or 20 minutes over the next 6 days and just kind of follow that very short method of stilling yourself, settling down, reflecting on a word, and just letting the presence of God be with you. And then when your thoughts get distracted, just to come back to that phrase. And then let me know what that looks like. Let me know what that feels like at the end of the week. Do you sense any changes inside of you? Do you sense any release of worry or anxiety? So we're going to be doing a series called State of Mind, where we're going to be focusing on what it means to be emotionally healthy and, as always, becoming more like Jesus. So bless you. Today we're also going to hear from John and Lara, and we're starting our new series on Jesus at the movies. It's going to be in the next 3 weeks, 3 different movies. Today, John and Lara are going to be speaking, and John is modelling his Noah beard at the moment because they're going to be talking about Evan Almighty. I don't think that's just the reason why he has the beard, but we're going to hand over to John and Lara. Bless you. Bye.
I am successful, powerful, handsome, happy.
Newly elected Congressman Evan Baxter's life
What are we gonna do? That's right!
was going exactly as planned.
There he is, the big kahuna.
I think I have to do the dance.
Do the dance.
Until he met someone with a plan of his own.
Who are you?
I'm God. Flood's coming, and I want you, Evan Baxter, to build an ark.
Yeah.
Well, hello, I'm John.
And I'm Lara.
And we are part of Coventry Vineyard. You're involved in the kids' work in the church.
Best place to be on a Sunday morning.
Indeed.
And safeguarding. And you are...
I am involved in the worship teams in the church as well. So,
That's us.
yeah, that's us. Nick asked us to do a short talk as part of the summer series looking at a film that has impacted us with some Christian themes. So we chose the sequel to Bruce Almighty, a really good family comedy called Evan Almighty. So we're going to talk briefly for a few minutes about our thoughts on that and how some of the themes that run through it have impacted on our lives. So, yeah, if you haven't seen the film, we'd highly recommend you do. And if you have seen it, we'd actually recommend you watch it again, because every time I watch it, which isn't that often, but it's we pick up new things from it, so it's a great film.
It's quite old, isn't it? How
Yeah,
old is it?
Probably 10 years plus
We
now.
actually watched it the other day on DVD.
Yeah, I know. DVD,
Shocking.
remember them. Yeah. Anyway,
So, a few points.
yes.
So the first point we thought we'd talk about is how actually God speaks to us all, but he often speaks in different ways to us. And I think it's quite important to actually realise how God most often speaks to us, because I know God most often speaks in particular ways to me, and I think once you know that, then you're more ready to listen to God, if that makes sense.
And the more that you tune into that and listen, the more you start to hear him and the clearer it becomes. So how do you do that?
Well, so how does God speak to me the
Yeah.
most? So God definitely speaks the most to me through coincidences, or some people call them God incidences.
They do.
So the same theme or thing will come up all the time. So it might be I hear a song and then read the same bit in the Bible, and then I'll go to church and they'll be speaking on the same thing. So that is definitely how God speaks to me the most. And I don't know if that's because I'm a bit like deaf and he's like, will you listen to me? So he has to do it in loads of different ways. But that's definitely my top one on how God speaks to me.
Yeah.
What about you?
So I sometimes hear God through being with other people and it through conversation, and God will spark something or a thought that I'll then go on to pursue and think about. Or maybe I often hear God through the Bible. I try and read the Bible regularly, and often it's amazing how often something that I read in the Bible has a direct connection with a conversation I have during that same day. And often as well, God speaks to me through the gift of hindsight. I can so often look back at a situation and see how God has absolutely moved in that time, and probably was speaking to me through it as well. And he's had his way, whether I fully understood what he was saying or not. I tend to just go on a bit of a whim. If I think I hear God speaking, then I'll take a chance, and it's never really been a bad thing to do.
But there's loads of weird ways God speaks, isn't there?
Yeah,
What
of
are some
course.
of the other ways? So some people actually hear, like an inner voice.
Yeah.
Pictures, dreams, prophecies.
Yeah.
Can you think of any other ways?
Very rarely, I've got to say, does God speak to me in the way that he does to Evan in the movie, where he's just suddenly there in the car, in the, like everywhere. It's I think I'd probably have had several cars written off if that was the case. Because So,
Yeah.
but yeah, find the way that God speaks to you and zone in on that a little bit and explore it, because it's life giving. Great.
Yeah. So when God does speak to us,
Yes.
and then we act upon it,
Yeah.
you wanted to say a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we moved to Coventry about 11 years ago. I took the job with Coventry Youth for Christ 12 years ago, though, which is a bit confusing. Yeah. So we had a whole year of not really having a house, I guess, because we decided to move to Coventry because we really felt God say that it was the right thing to do, move to take on the role with Coventry Youth for Christ, just about a week before the big housing crash of 2008. As a result, our house dropped in value significantly just as we were trying to sell it. And no one wanted to buy a house, so we were stuck. And we moved to take the role in Coventry, but for a short time we had to live with a friend of ours in Rugby because we couldn't afford to rent and to pay our mortgage in Stoke-on-Trent at the same time. So after a couple of months of living with our friend, we realised it was a bit tight and a bit awkward with our two small children. We were really praying, God, what do you want us to do? How do we move forward with this? And we had a random call from a friend of mine who basically said, I know a couple in Rugby, an older couple who have married in their later years, I guess. They've both had their own houses and they're moving into one house together, and they've really sensed God say that rather than sell the other house, there's a young couple that need it for a time. And so he put us in touch and we met up and we were able to live rent-free in a really nice little house in Rugby just at the time we needed it for the best part of a year.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And it was such an answer that when you step out and do what God has called you to do, God provides the resources again, a bit like in the movie. And the beautiful thing about it is, and the way that we know for sure that it was a God thing, is that we knew we'd got about a year at tops that we could live in this house, and we were struggling to sell our house in Stoke-on-Trent. We'd been up and redecorated, done all kinds of things to try and sell the house. The couple that had lent us the house contacted us and said, in September I think it was, and said, we need to come and have dinner with you guys. And we knew that was it. They were going to tell us they needed the house back and they needed to sell it. So we put a date in the diary and we arranged to meet them for dinner. Anyway, the day came about a week and a half later that the couple were going to come and visit us for dinner. And at lunchtime that day, I got a call from our estate agent to tell us that our house had just sold. And so we were able to have dinner with that couple, and rather than the fear of having to find somewhere else to live, we were able to tell them that our house had sold that very day and that we were able to start looking for a house in Coventry.
Cool.
And that, you might call it a coincidence, but there were too many coincidences for that just to be a coincidence and nothing more.
No,
and it was absolutely a sign that God was on our case and really blessed us because we made the decision to move even in some difficult circumstances.
Yeah, so find out how God speaks to you most commonly.
Yeah.
Zone into that.
Yeah.
And do what he says.
Yeah, absolutely.
Simple.
Absolutely.
Easy to say,
Yeah.
not as easy to do. So that's our first point. Our second point is they talk in the film about random acts of kindness.
Yeah, it's actually acts of random kindness.
Oh, sorry.
Because, not giving too much away, it's all about building an ark. As in A-R-K.
Yeah.
It's clever, isn't it?
It's very clever.
So acts of random kindness. I think that lockdown and this... Oh.
Can I say the quote?
Yes.
So the quote in the film is, change the world one act of random kindness at a time.
Yeah.
Now, that isn't going to change the world, but it's a really good thing to do.
Absolutely. And during this time of lockdown, COVID-19 is everywhere, and it's been a horrible experience for a lot of people. But actually, in this time of lockdown, it's given us a bit of a chance to get to know our neighbours a little bit better. It's given us a chance just to do generous things for people in the local neighbourhood, to step out and make a small difference where we can without being too heavy about it. But I just think it's been really helpful, and we've built some really great relationships with our neighbours through that. Do you want to give a couple of examples?
Yeah, so at the beginning I sent little cards to all our neighbours just saying if they needed any shopping doing. then we do that. And then at Easter time, I sent another card saying Happy Easter and please let us know if there's anything you want us to pray for. And although I got a couple of texts back saying thank you, we didn't hear much more. But just the other day, there's an older lady that lives down the road and she was mowing her grass and she said, thank you so much for the cards you put through. It really meant a lot knowing that there was someone there.
Yeah.
So it's tiny little things. But also we've been outside more, so we've got to know our neighbours better, who've had twins during lockdown, who are gorgeous.
Yeah.
We've had barbecues together. You go running with the chappie now.
Yeah. And just things like thinking to take next door's wheelie bin in when we bring ours in. Little things that just say, I'm thinking about someone other than myself right now, I think is really significant. And I've had some really good spiritual-ish conversations with neighbours about, like, because people want to know why there's something a bit different about us. And that's been really positive.
And one thing we've been talking about in our, are they called life groups?
We'll call them life groups.
One thing we've been talking about in our life group as well is like when we're talking with our neighbours and the people we know and our friends about actually when we say to them, we'll pray for this, we're almost doing our bit, but then letting God do his bit, because it's not us that change people, it's not us that bring people closer to God, it's God that does it.
Yeah.
And just an example of that is the lady who does my eyebrows, because I was texting her because she doesn't do mine. She would be back at work next week. She was in hospital with sepsis, and I was just messaging her and she said they can't find the cause of infection. So I just messaged her and said I'm going to pray that they find what the infection is. And the next day they did, and they gave her the correct medication, and she came out of hospital. Now she might link that back to God, she might not, but actually I said I'd pray for her, and the next day the prayer was answered.
Random question. How have you ended up with this really great relationship with the woman that does your eyebrows?
I just texted her. Well,
How did that start? Was that just you texted her to ask for an appointment and it went further?
Yeah, I chat to anyone.
She does, it's true. It's true. Very rarely me.
The kids always go, why do you talk to that random person about that random dog thing? But yeah. And it's normally waffle, and you'll be in the background going, oh.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's that point. Third point? Do we have a third point? That was the third point?
Yeah. When there was only 2 real points.
Oh, no, there was a third point, because we talked about it, remember? Anyway, here we go. So third point is, I've forgotten. No, it'll come. Oh, yeah. In the movie, Evan keeps on trying to hide the fact that God's speaking to him and he's doing stuff differently. So there's one point where he turns up and God has said to him, he's grown a big beard, and God said to him, I want you to wear this robe. And anyway.
Please keep that bit.
Yeah, and he wanted to wear this robe, and so Evan tries to hide the robe underneath his regular kind of work suit, and then turns up to work looking absolutely ridiculous. And I just think it's really important that we don't try and hide the stuff that God is doing in our lives. As God changes us, we need to let that be evident to the people around us as well. And that might be in a really subtle way. I wouldn't recommend wearing a bathrobe or whatever underneath your work suit. But there might be some small ways that you can communicate the fact that you have a faith in God and that your life is being changed by him. Just in the way you engage with your work colleagues and friends. So I just wanted to throw that out as a little kind of caveat. Are the ways that God's changing you, and how are you letting that be evident in your day-to-day walking around life, rather than just keeping that for kind of your overflow of that on a Sunday, I guess. So, yeah. So there you go, there were 3 points. We've done a good rounded talk.
3-point sermon.
What were they again?
They were, God speaks to us in different ways, so zone in and then do what he says.
Yeah.
Second point was random acts of kindness.
Yeah.
And about letting God do his bit in that as well.
Yeah.
And the third point was how do our friends know that we love Jesus?
Yeah, absolutely. There you go, A+, well done. Great. hopefully that's been useful. Again, we would recommend that you watch the movie because there are so many other little things in there as well, and it's a great funny movie, so do enjoy that. Hopefully that's been informative and a little bit helpful. I'm sure you can get in touch with us or Nick or any of the leadership team if you want to ask any further questions, but thank you for tuning in, and that's us done, so bye.
Bye.